show that goes into detail of all things sewing, tools and techniques that appear on the Great British Sewing Bee. And we go into detail because the Sewing Bee can't because of time limits, but we've got loads of time, and we can also do it in detail because we have master tailor and couturier Carol Elaine here as always. Hey Carol.
Hi Stuart, how are you?
I'm very well, getting very excited because it's quarter-final week.
All happened so fast, here we are.
I know, indeed, didn't it just? And it's movies. Love a good movie and I love a good musical, hey?
Oh yes, all the greats. I've been listening to musicals for so long.
Now, Dirty Dancing, have you made a baby dress or two in your career?
I have.
And I think I could find one.
Yeah, I've made them for singers, I made them for dancers, and I have my own, this is my own transformation challenge I set to myself. I gave myself 4 hours and I had 1.5 meters of fabric. So I made a circular skirt.
Oh, wow.
There's your 180 degrees and it's just really lovely the way it moves.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, but I chose to make a circular skirt, and then I gave myself 2 rectangles to pleat back into the skirt, a center front opening, and that pleats back into a neck strap. And that just ties in a little bow at the back. So it's a backless dress, but it's all secure because that rectangle folds back on itself and then goes back into the side back and the side front panel. So there's your 2 seams there. There's your quadrant.
Yes,
side,
look at that.
Side back and side front.
Oh, Carol, that is exquisite.
Well, thank you. It's a joy to make. But I'll tell you what, it really made me realize that the pressure that the sewers are under, because, you know, this is unfinished. It's just a prototype. That took me 4 hours. So for me, it's getting harder to, you know, evaluate the true skill set of these contestants because they're under such pressure.
Yes. And they're in such pressure that they can't then really show their skills off. And it's that question that we've had many times, isn't it? Just why can't they have more time, show their skills off, and then be judged properly on their skills? Because even if they had 10 hours each, they're not going to come up with the same polished, finished article, are they? They're going to have different elements to them.
No, but at least they'll be able to relax. And they'll be able to plan. And I think, you know, with the transformation challenge, they're not able to really plan and think about it, you know, sit back and look at their fabric and see what it can do. And there's a lot of things that aren't finished. I mean, we can see that Fari's not finishing garments, but other people aren't finishing hems or aren't cleaning things up the way they might otherwise, like you said, if they had a bit more time. So this is a tricky junction here
and of course you could judge it better if you've had longer time. You could properly judge the skills, can't you? Fairly.
You can. I think so. I think you're right. You could set criteria, you could have a scoring system, and then you could actually have your benchmark, you know, things that you're marking against.
So
now I was going to say you could truly then you could judge on the creativity, on the technique, and on the risk factor. So if somebody chose a particularly demanding cloth, you could put that into the formula.
Definitely. Right, well, let's go straight into this. I want to talk more about this baby dress because obviously it was the pattern challenge, and they had 28 pattern pieces.
Yeah, that's quite a lot.
Huge.
It's really involved. Yeah.
And it's all about the circle, is that right? And I know that's what the tutorials are focused on, how to deal with circles or how to make and cut the circle.
Yes, that's correct. So this had a circular skirt. Now you can divide that into as many panels as you want. I've decided to use four quadrants. It's just easy and it's easy to create. So you can take you know, a newspaper, you know, you can fold it in half and fold it in half again, and then you can make your circle. So there's your pattern. And then you decide what your waistline is, and then you carve that out of the point of this pattern that you've made up. So yeah, and then it's how once you get that circle seamed together, however many pieces you have, there were 3 in this particular baby dress, then that just gets hemmed after it settles, because you've got to let it settle. The bias portions of each quadrant or each triad, in this case, is going to stretch, and any fabric will do that. You know, even Damien's upholstery fabric will stretch on the bias. So you get the skirt set in, you make things up, let it hang on the mannequin, and then you can even it out, which is what Serena did. And I don't know if any of the other contestants managed that, but that's the real challenge with making a circular skirt: putting it together, letting it hang, and then evening it out.
I mean, circles, from my limited experience from patchwork, circles are hard. I avoid them. There is a famous circular pattern called the Drunkard's Path, which is, as you were saying, it's like the piece of cheese and then that circular bit. And my mind can't compute when I put that seam together, because it's like, it doesn't look right, doesn't fit naturally. So I find that really difficult. So it must be just as difficult for sewers too, I presume.
It is. It's just tricky because you're dealing with the most lively part of the cloth. And I can imagine if you're building a quilt, you have to repeat that many times to get a pattern. You see, we would just do that once. So I think if you're working with a smaller pattern, the challenge is harder for you.
But from a circular point of view, you think they're magical, is that right?
I love circles. There's so much you can do, and you can make them actually pieces of sculpture which stand on their own, or they can be quite floaty and frisky and you know, they just move so beautifully.
Well, let's go into the first tutorial then, and let's see Carol telling us how to cut a spiral. Is that right? A spiral circle ruffle.
That's right. That's right.
Here we go.
So here I have just a random piece of cloth, and we're going to inscribe a circle in it. And the easiest way to do that is just to fold it into quarters first, and make sure that you press the creases with your hands so that all the edges are even. So here I've got it into quarters. And now I'm going to fold it again into eighths. I'm going to bring this around so it's easier to see. So the point needs to be crisp and all the edges need to be pressed down. So we're going to just mark equidistant points from the point out, creating a set of radiuses. And I'm going to use not your tool of choice, but you'll be able to see this better. So here I'm going to choose about 9 inches, and I'm just going to mark from the point out, make sure that the tape is straight, and then just make a set of marks equidistant so that you have enough, and then you can connect them by eye, rock of eye. That's the rule. So here we go. Just going to neaten that up a little bit. And now you've got a lot of layers, so you might want to cut half of them and then do the other half. So edges are all even, and here we go. I'm going to start with 4 layers. So just cut along those lines that you made, and then flip that over and then cut the rest. Now, once you're finished with this, you can open it up and you'll have yourself a near perfect circle, which is all you really need. Now, you can see we've got our center point. We're going to be working toward that with a spiral. So we're going to start on the edge, and we're going to work right into that center point by using this Pattern Master tool. And again, we're going to use a dark marker. Okay, so you start at any point on the circle, and we're going to use the 2.5 inch distance here, which is an easy point to reference on this Pattern Master tool because it's all set there. So measure 2.5 inches all around your circle on the outer edge, and then we're going to come to a point on the outer edge. See, we have to come to the outer edge there. So now we're going to move inward toward the center of the circle. We're going to be following those marks we originally made with our 2.5 inch mark. And you can see now what we're all about here. We're gonna have an inward spiral, and that's going to end at the center point. Okay, so just keep going, and now we're going to join this latest set of marks using 2.5 from that point, and you can see now we're getting very near the center. So when you open this all up, cut all these lines through and you open it all up, you'll see what happens. Now here's one that I prepared earlier, and I've put the lines in quite light, but I'll be able to see them to cut, and it's all set up now to make a proper spiral ruffle. So this is a very thin cotton knit. So when you start cutting cotton knit, you kind of have to grab the cloth, almost cut backwards with the blade of your shears, so that you create a well in the cloth, and then they start cutting easier. So we'll just keep going around, moving the circle in cut sections. Now, the other thing to mention is that you can imagine that these are very lazy curves. This is not a very sharp curve. This is a shallow curve. But the closer we get to the center, the curves are going to become sharper, more condensed. And when we get to the center, then I'm going to unravel it, and I'm going to show you how you can use different curves and sets of curves to create a different effect on your garment. If you want a very, very concentrated ruffle, then you use a sharper curve. If you want just a bit of a flutter, then you can use one of these outer curve shapes. And you can cut these up and join them and make very long ruffles. It just depends upon what you're outlining. It could be a cuff of a shirt. It could be something down the center front of a shirt. It could be you're trimming a spiral all the way around a skirt or down a trouser leg. So you just design the kind of curve you want and then make it up using all or part of these spirals. Now you see the last piece we have left over is a circle. That's quite right. And here we go. The closer we are to the inside of the circle, look at this. Look at how condensed that is, and you've got loads of trumpets. But if we go down halfway, you can see the ruffles are less, and it's a bit more shallow. Okay, so that's a more subtle set of curves. And then this is the very outside of the circle where we started, and even more subtle treatment. So, when you're designing your garment, you have a choice. This is a really easy method to end up with exactly the volume you want. Here's another one where you get like a waterfall. These trumpets fall in line. You see there? So you can see how versatile this is. Yeah, so just play around, cut a nice big circle of ruffles. This is what I thought you could do. This is actually going around a shape, around a skirt, around a top. So you get the idea. Here's another example of what you might do with circles. Here I have 2 circles. I've cut 2 layers. I've sewed them together in the outer seam, and I've understitched them so that I know exactly which is the right side and which is the wrong side. Now you can use a contrast fabric here if you want, or a lace and an underlay. And this shows how you can use a circle with a bit more posture. So here we have a cuff, and it's quite sturdy. Or you can pick a very lightweight cloth. Here's the tulle, and I've sewed this in tiers. So this is a circle, and I've just cut it from the outside into the center. And you can see here, this might be a sleeve, or this might be a different kind of a ruffle. Now here's the preparation I used to make my dancer's dress. It's a 4-quadrant circle. In the inside of the circle you cut the radius, which is equal to your waistline. From there to the outer edge, this is your length, and around is your hemline. We're going to make a pattern for one of these 4 quadrants, and here I'm using, in miniature, this piece of tracing paper. So you can see we have one of 4. We have the straight of grain on the outer edge, and inside we have the true bias. Now this is the part of the garment that's going to stretch, and this is what you'd have to neaten up before you hem. So here we've traced the quadrant, and we've added on in these dotted lines a seam allowance for your French seams to set into the bodice and a hem. And then all you have to do now is to cut each quadrant, the 4 the same, and layer them on. You see I'm lapping here because we have a seam allowance for our French seam. And now you get the idea of how the procedure works for making your pattern and cutting the sections and assembling your circular skirt.
So we can now do circles. I can now see how challenging that would be. And I think one of the things Patrick said right at the beginning of this challenge, it is going to be technically challenging. The fabrics they're using are technically challenging. Can you give us, certainly me, because I'm still very inexperienced with some fabrics, some background about chiffon and satin? They were the 2 fabrics they were using, is that right?
So they're 2 different weaves. So the chiffon weave it's more contained. The warp and the weft are obedient with each other. With satin, it's different because the warp and the weft have different properties. So if you have a slight curve and you cut satin on a slight curve, it just starts to just peel away from itself. It frays so much easier. So it's really tricky. I think the neckline would have been quite tricky. And bagging out the neckline using satin would have been a real challenge because the fabric just starts to peel away from itself. It frays so easily. Right. And so it almost, as soon as you cut it, it starts to fray.
Oh, wow.
So the more you handle it, the more unruly it gets. And you mustn't be afraid of that. Sometimes it can fray almost 1/4 inch. So your seam allowance is almost destroyed even before you start to sew. So you've got to be really careful with that. Be careful not to bend it out of shape. Keep it all, in line and true to the pattern. And you could see, I think it was Serena who did a light blue version of the baby dress. And you could see when it was going through the machine, all these long threads that had just come away from the weave.
Wow.
So that's it. Chiffons are easier. Organzas are easier, I think. But when you're working with circles, don't forget that you have this quadrant that you're working with. And here you've got a straight of the grain, and here you have the cross grain. So when you're working on those weaves, you're okay. But it's when you start working on the curve, which is more on the bias, the round of that quadrant, that's where things get a little tricky and things just pull away. So each fabric has its different properties. Each weave has a different property. But
when working when working with those fabrics as a designer, are they used on their own? Do you just have a chiffon dress, or are they often used with other fabrics?
It depends on the density and the effect that you want. If light's going to pass through, then you need to interline it to align it with something so that it doesn't, it's not see-through. And it depends on the effect. So if you have a softer layer on top, when the dress begins to move, the layers can move independently. So you get a different effect. So it just depends really on the density and what you want. What you want to see and what you want.
Yeah. What have you got on your one there? What's your one there?
This is a prototype. So this is just, this is a Georgette.
Oh, right.
So this is a silk and it's a Georgette weave. So it's diaphanous. You can see through it. But this would be for a ballerina who's already wearing an under set of garments.
Yeah.
Tights and her, and probably a backless leotard.
I see.
You can see through it, but the purpose of this on stage is to see through the dress, through to the body of the dancer.
Okay.
So it just has that's a different property. It's lighter than the satin that our contestants were working with.
Yes, and I presume you use those fabrics for a reason as well, as you said, for see-through, but also for waftiness and beautiful flowiness.
That's right, for flounce and flutter and billow and twirl, those kinds of words.
So for that, the idea of the movies, we saw a lot of that in old classic movies, dresses.
You look at Ginger Rogers, and you look at her twirling around, and you see the layers. If you look at Margot Fontaine on stage, with those beautiful fabrics, and even the famous Marilyn Monroe dress on the grate of the subway. That fabric had to lift. It had to react to air. So that would have been chosen. I think that was a fan pleated fabric, but you've got to look at gravity and what you want the garment to do. This has to perform this frock.
Yes, completely.
This is a performance in itself. It's not just, the wearer. This has a job to do.
And I can now begin to understand Raf's skills in his job as a textile designer. The knowledge that you have of fabrics must help so much with designing a garment or an outfit.
Yeah, so true. And the more you know about fabrics, the more you know you don't want to do anything alien to that fabric. There's enough work involved, as we've seen in this competition. Yeah. So you want to give yourself the best chance by picking the best fabric.
Well, let's go into the second tutorial where you pretty much show us how to make a circular skirt and how to make the dress. Can't wait.
Here we have the prototype of our dancer's dress, and it's made of two components. The first is a skirt, and that's built on the full circle. And the second is the bodice, which is made of two just plain rectangular shapes. Our skirt has 4 panels. The first one is set on center, then we have 2 side panels, and we have a back panel. And the bodice is pleated into the waistline to sort out our bust darts. And then again it's gathered into the shoulder, and that's put into a tie back. The construction of our skirt is French seam. So here we have a seam within a seam. And then the hem is a simple pin hem. Now this is made with a guide stitch that you then press over and then turn to the outside and top stitch as close as you can to the edge of about 1/16 of an inch, and then working back on the inside of the garment, trim away the excess fabric as close to those lines of stitching as you can. So our 4-panel skirt into the pleated bodice, and then I'll just quickly show you the back. You can see how this triangular section goes in to the side back seam of our skirt. And this is going to be a zip or a set of hook and bars or something, but this is going to be how you get into the dress. And then there's our bodice section pleated into this simple back bow tie. So here is our prototype, our first run at our dancer's dress.
can you tell us more about that round curvy tool? I can't remember what it was called now. What was it?
The Pattern Master.
Oh, that's it. Yes.
Pattern Master. Okay. It's always to hand. And on the top, you have your rule, your inches, and you have a center point here. So it goes from the center, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches. You get it in centimeters as well. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the other side. You've got some pivot holes here that you can use with your awl if you're moving darts, increasing darts or whatever. And then you have your 45-degree angle lines. Can you see that?
Yeah, yeah. And I've got a picture. We can cut to the picture as well.
Oh,
so
right.
I can overlay.
And then on the other side, you have a grading tool. Maybe I'll put it against a white wall. Okay, so you have 1/4 inch grades here. And you've got these lovely curves here that you can trace off. So whatever you're drafting, whether it's the front edge of a jacket or an armhole or another curve, this is a really good one for the bottom edge of a gent's coat here. But it's got just about every curve that you need to make a pattern. And I always use it for adding on. And when I was doing the spiral, I chose this 2.5 inch grade. It's set up in 1/4 inch. So from here to here, you have 2.5 inches. And that's what I use. So it's a great tool. All credit goes to Martin Shoben, who was a wonderful educator. Martin Shoben, I think. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and Martin Shoben designed this. And it is something that you need to have to hand, and you can buy it from a number of suppliers.
So he designed it. He's called it the Pattern Master, has he?
He's called it the Pattern Master. Yes.
What's his background?
He's an educator. He had his own fashion. If you give me a second, Stuart, I can.
I love this.
Yeah.
What's Carol going to get out this time?
I know. Where are we going now? So this really, if you'll permit me, I think this is one of the best books that you can have.
All right, yes.
Pattern cutting and making up. It shows you how to draft patterns, how to manipulate them to different sizes and different styles. You can move darts. You can create all sorts of style lines. It's written in conjunction with Janet Ward. Okay. This is and I took a second one out as well because this is a draping exercise.
Yeah.
So I literally just put fabric on the stand and then designed it right there on the mannequin. So, and I've got a lot of use out of this book. So this is the draping exercise. And again, Martin's in collaboration.
I can imagine all the viewers now frantically writing this down and going off to find it from their local bookstore later.
Go for it. And look, this is an accident. I just happened to open up to page 47, which shows you how to cut a spiral ruff.
There it is.
Now that is just serendipity. I cannot believe the coincidence there. I just happened to open up to that.
You said also, circles were magical, so there you are. That's magic.
They are magical. You see the kind of useful direction you get here. The illustrations are terrific. The directions are terrific. It's not something you get in modern books, I have to say. Get these. These are fantastic.
There we are. You heard Carol. If you want to improve your spelling, get those books. I'm going to get them now. Now, we were talking earlier about the fabric, chiffon and satin. Can you give any guidance on machine needles? Because I know you've got an industrial there, but if I'm using that at home, are we talking fine needles? I need to take out my 80-12, 90-14, I think it is. Do I go down much?
Go down to a 70.
Okay.
Get a nice sharp needle. Yes. I mean, I have to say, I use a 70 for just about everything.
Oh, really?
If I'm sewing denim and if I'm top stitching, I might go to, I work in old money and new money. So I might go to a 14 or a 16. But I find anything, leather, Alcantara, boucle, chiffon, wool. I use the same needle. I mean, I use good thread. It all passes through the needle, and that way you're less chance of splitting threads as well.
Yeah. And you'll use cotton thread with certain types of fabric, or are you actually using polyester thread? Some people say you should use cotton if you're using natural fibers.
You can, but I like polyester mercerized cotton or polyester because it's stronger.
Yeah, yeah.
It has a bit of elasticity in it, and yeah. I mean, it's more about how you sew. It's more about the stitch length. It's more about protection of the seam. There's a lot involved.
Yeah.
So that's why I can pretty much across the board use the same needle and the same threads. It's just how I treat each seam, how I reinforce it, and how I, build up on it.
Well, look at that. We've done circles, we've done tools of the pattern master, we've done books as well, and needles. That's detail and a half, all around the pattern challenge and that circular skirt. So let's go into then our analysis. Would love to hear what you think now of the quarterfinals. So let's go through, in no particular order that I've got written down, Damien, Raf, Serena, Rebecca, Fari. So Damien's pattern challenge circular skirt dress. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Damien is the one that didn't quite get the hem fixed up right, didn't he? But I thought he made a good effort.
Yes, the judges said, because I wrote down what Patrick said, he came bottom, he came fifth, because he said it was mostly because the zip was wrong. But I thought the zip was actually kind of neat. Was it not neat?
Damien made the best zip of all, although he didn't follow the directions and make a lap zip. But I think that was because of the time element. So he just set it in on center, and it was perfectly lined up with the seam. I really admired it. Fine. His goal was to finish.
And you have to respect that, because they're in a competition. Surely it's best to finish it. And I can understand where Fari's coming from. Spend time to get something beautiful and then don't finish the bottom. But the top part of her bodice, I think, was beautiful, wasn't it? But it wasn't finished. So that's where I feel for Damien in a way.
Exactly. This is the way it's been going week on week. We don't know what the criteria is.
Raf with his was it magenta-y, red or purpley? I couldn't work out the color there.
Yeah, the color threw me a little. It was a youthful dress with a mature color. That's the way I looked at it. So no, that was not one of my favorites.
And I was panicking about his because he didn't get the lace on till towards right at the end. They had to put that belt, that sort of lacy bit across the middle, didn't they? And he was like, right. Oh, where is it? And I think he struggled with the hem. It was what did they say? I think I wrote it down, that they were expected to overlock and single turn the hem.
Yes. So what would have helped there for everyone would have been to sew a guide stitch first, all the way around the hem, maybe at a centimeter or ½ inch would have been.
Oh, is this what you taught me, the stay stitch?
That's a stay stitch.
Yes.
So just get yourself a line and then overlock it, and then you know where to press. But this, of course, is after you neaten the hem up, after it's stretched. So you see a lot of them that, kind of undulated.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't neatened up. But after you arrive at your the length you want, and you sometimes have to pin from either the floor up or the waist down, then I would cut it, and then I would sew a stay, and then overlock it, and then turn it up one turn, and then top stitch it.
See, when you taught me about the stay stitch on the Baker Boys cap, before you used the wool, it was remarkable how much that helped.
Oh, good.
Really, because you put the stay stitch in, and then when you start to sew, you've got, as you say, you've got that line, you know where you're going to, don't you?
You know where you are. And also, when you cut a triangle with your Baker Boy pieces, I forgot how many pieces there were. Were there
8?
8? There were 8. Yes. So you're working on the bias again.
Yeah, that's right.
You're working on the stretchy, unruly part of the cloth. So if you stay stitch it, it does 2 things. It keeps that weave intact for the most part. I mean, you can still stretch against a stay stitch. It keeps it intact, and then it gives you a guide, so you know where you are. So your hem's going to come out even.
Totally invaluable. And I can understand why people don't do it. There's things like that in patchwork where you want to skip because you just want to go straight to the sewing. But sometimes, you know, if you skip those stages, it's going to come back to you at the end result, isn't it? So, and I know it's a competition, they perhaps didn't have time to do that, but I can understand how that can have such a big impact on the final thing.
But it is surprising, Stuart, how little time it takes. It is all in the preparation, and sometimes preparation is just a sliver of the time, you know, and it doesn't take much to just run it through the machine, and then you've got your benchmark.
And actually, it can save you so much time. So actually, if you do think it's taking 10, 15 minutes more, it's going to save you time in the long run, isn't it? So
it's like so many things, isn't it? It's like so many things. Whatever you're building.
Yeah. Serena and her blue version with the kind of navy-ish, blackish contrast lace bit.
Too much of a contrast, really. It threw it off. And the lace was less to the waistband. The waistband's quite a tall waistband, wasn't it? So to have the lace inside and you know, then this is where Rebecca chose a really lovely lace, I thought, because she covered the whole band.
It was nice, wasn't it? Because it went up and down, didn't it?
Yes, yeah, that was beautiful. That was beautiful.
Well, we were moving on to Rebecca next, and she said, well, I think I've got here, she struggled with the zip a bit, but as they all did.
Yeah, they all did.
What was this? Just explain that type of zip for us, because I don't understand what that was, what they had to do.
So a lap zip is a slightly displaced seam where you would sew your seam up to the point that the zip starts, the bottom of the zip. And then you would open up the seam slightly. So the seam that fit over is probably a half-inch seam, because you'd need a bit more to cover the zip. So one side of the seam sneaks into the zip, and then the other side lays over it. So I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but you just have to, in one side of that center back seam has to kick out a little bit, and then that gets top stitched to one side of the zip tape, and then the other side of that seam just gets pressed into its normal seam allowance, a half an inch. So say underneath it's at 1 centimeter, over it's at half an inch. And that encloses the zip.
So it is it's a specific zip for a reason. You use that zip only, that type of zip for a certain garment. Is that right?
It's kind of it's an old-fashioned way of putting in a zip, because now it was before we had concealed zips.
I see.
You used to lap them over. Now the zip is buried into the seam evenly, or you do something on center, like what Damien did with his made to measure challenge for the Christmas party dress. But in order to get a lap zip to work, one seam has to kick out a little, and then the other one falls over it, and that is this half of the seam that encloses the zip.
So we could
I could draw it, but it's hard to explain.
No, it's all right. No, we can probably surmise then that the program, or the when they were designing this for the competition, that was probably going to be the skill that got the sewers.
Yes, that is what I would call the ringer.
Oh yes, we had this. Yeah, we had it before.
I've seen it in all the episodes. It says why you've let them do concealed zips all through the show. Why does this have to be a lap zip? It's trickier.
Yeah.
And it's a way to, separates the wheat from the checks. And most people had trouble with it, except Damien, because he didn't do it.
Yeah. And then lastly, Fari, which was interesting because she didn't appear much in the edit. They didn't, whether it's because she had her head down, so therefore there was nothing to edit her in that was interesting, because she was just sewing, but she didn't appear much. But it was unfinished, wasn't it?
That's right. That's right. I think she got the bodice fairly lined up, and her shoulder seams were okay. But then it from there, it was the zip that was a problem, and it was the hem, if I remember correctly.
Yes, there was no hems. So it was then those two at the bottom. So it was Fari and Damien, fourth and fifth. Though Patrick did say, and I wrote this down, it was close between the two of them, but that's when Patrick said mostly Damien because the zip was wrong. Raf was in the middle, third, Rebecca second, and Serena first. Did you get the impression that Serena might have been a long way first, or Rebecca and Serena high up and then the 3, 4, 5? What did you take of the last standings?
I think Serena was streets ahead. Because of the shoulder seam were really well matched, and she saw to it to even out her skirt, and it was enchanting. It's a shame about the trim, but I mean, you can't really knock a person down for that.
Yeah.
Because the rest of it was so good.
For 4.5 hours.
For 4.5 hours, it was clean, it was neat, and this is what is setting Serena up, for a possible win. We'll have to see, but it's because her technique is just so clean and orderly, and she's just accurate.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the transformation challenge then. So the transformation challenge. Now, I quite like this. Me and Tig were talking about this on Unpicked last night. It was a challenge for the first time where it was almost old school, season 1 and 2 of Sewing Bee. You have a curtain, you have to turn it into a garment. And it's something that we can all do at home because we've all got a curtain at home and we can all do it, like good old Sound of Music. So I think I was excited about what I was going to see about this. How did you feel about it?
Oh, same here. I thought, as soon as I saw the rail with the header tape on and the pleats in it, I thought, I wonder how many people are going to dare to use that detail. Because, play clothes are lovely things to make. They're jolly, they're fun, they're rugged, and upholstery fabric is the perfect fabric to use. I really look forward to it.
So they were tasked with creating a practical play outfit. How practical some of them were, I don't know, but I think they sort of glossed over that in the judging. But same order that we talked of, no particular, that we had in the first one. Damien first, his shorts and braces.
Well, talk about practical,
Yes.
Or impractical. You need something to wear under it. That's the first thing, right? It really couldn't be worn on its own. But nice job. Well done. It was just, the whole thing was a bit slim,
Yeah, yes, it was, wasn't it? Like
the whole thing was just, it was part of a play suit, I thought. And then he decided to do the fly with poppers, and then that went a bit wrong.
Wow.
I think what happened was I thought about this. They showed him putting the popper on with a hammer. I remember saying, there's nothing like a good hammer, something like that. I thought, oh, Damien. And I think it might have seen that it didn't go in quite right. So that made it easy for them then to test it.
To focus on it. Because it just seemed odd, didn't it, really?
Yes.
There's my cat. I'm just going to pause there, get my cat.
Come on.
Come on, Poppy. Come on.
Right, so. We turn the lights a bit.
For the last 10 minutes. That's not, I've done it. She gets like that, does Poppy?
Oh.
She's 15. She's getting on a bit. Bless her.
Oh, bless.
And she sits down at the bottom of the stairs, just meowing, and I could hear her doing it for the last 10 minutes. I'm thinking, I'll have to pick her up and bring her upstairs and put her on the bed.
Well, you should do that. It's lovely to see her.
Oh, there we go. Right, so that was Damien. And so it's Raf. What did you think about Raf and his yellowy green? It reminded me of Norwich City and the Canaries and the little frills.
Oh, I thought it was a very good move to try that challenge of using the header tape with it.
Yes, on the middle bit.
The middle bit. And I think that worked quite well. I didn't understand the trim. That was the only thing about that garment.
Yes.
It was a bit incongruous for me, but...
Was that a case of him thinking, let's get something else, some textural work, let's go into the haberdashery, a bit like Damien. Shall we go into the haberdashery and get something?
Yeah, possibly. But then I'm just not sure it married up. But there you go.
As you say, clever using those pleated bits.
Yeah, I think that was enough.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the eye, certainly the focus, wasn't it?
Yeah, because there was enough detail in the fabric. It was colorful enough, and he used that. And it was a nice bib and a nice crisscross in the back with his X stitches and his reinforcement. I think there was plenty there. But obviously he felt that it needed a bit more. And I think we're at the stage now where people want to show the judges as much as possible. And
I think that's where Serena did well, didn't she?
Yeah. I liked her outfit. I thought it was an interesting, it was a completely different style. It was kimono-esque, but I didn't like the trim. I didn't like the maroon. It was heavy, too heavy for me. And she chose a softer color for the neck. And I think for me, I would have liked to have seen a softer color. It was just a bit too much contrast. Yeah. But evidently the judges, they took to that very well.
And then the idea of cutting out another bit and then pliquing it down.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting to center that on and have it kind of floating.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Rebecca with her skirt and shorts.
Very clever. I liked that the best. I thought that the bow was a bit too focused. It was a bit too large, but I think she did more than any other contestant by incorporating the shorts with the skirt and then using the lining, which was lovely. It kind of evened out the boldness of the cloth. I thought she did a really smashing job, and she was very close in contention, I thought, to
yes, and I think the editor started to bring that out. We started to get little chats with her about first and second coming second to Serena. They started to play on that for sure this episode, didn't they?
They did, because, well, for me, Stuart, all through the competition, you know, I've noticed that we had two people. We had Rebecca and we had Andrew, who seemed to be a bit overlooked and also quite content to be in the second place or the third place, or didn't really want to be first fiddle, if you know what I mean. And suddenly Rebecca's saying, hey, wait a second. I don't have to settle. I could be in that first position. And I think she's going for it.
Yes, almost fire in the belly now.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Fari with her garment with the shoulder bits, which again she said she'd done before, so she's drawing on experience. Why not? That's what we all do when we make things.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. You do what works, but she was so close with that zip. I couldn't understand why. When she sewed in the one side, she just didn't sew in the other side. I mean, we're talking about a couple of minutes. So something's gone wrong with her timings and her ability to plan here. That is a great shame, because to see that almost done and have the zip in place, I mean, we know it doesn't take long, does it?
Well, then the final standings are exactly the same, apart from a swap at the bottom. So Serena again first, Rebecca second, Raf third, Damien fourth, and then Fari fifth. So we're going into the final challenge knowing that Damien and Fari have both been bottom. So it was, wasn't it? And we're then going, well, they both produced historically, haven't they? Very good made to measures. They've clearly practiced. So it was going to be a good made to measure, really. We were all eyes on these two.
That's right. Absolutely. And Fari did say, well, this has not been a very good day for me, but I'm going to come back tomorrow and I'm going to do what I need to do. And she did.
So the made to measure, a disco dress, no, beg your pardon, a disco diva outfit. That was the brief. Sequins, all bright things, lame. What do you think of lame fabric?
Center stage. I love working with lame because it just takes to the light so beautifully. You know, it's so reflective, and lame can be warp and weft, and it can be very structural and sculptural, or it can be liquid.
So what would you have gone for if you were in that position? What would have been the first sort of the design that you would have gone for, or fabrics?
Probably would have chosen a light sequence or something that had a metallic quality but was easy to sew.
Right.
Something that wouldn't break needles so often, like sequence does. But I'm sure we'll get into it when we look at each of the offerings.
Yes, well, let's go into it. We'll use the same order that we've done so far, which it starts with Damien. I don't know why I got him first. What was going on in his head, do you think, with the design, first of all?
When I was a young girl, I used to watch a program called Lost in Space. And they had these great color block costumes. And they were lost in some planet. And I thought to myself, this is Damien. He's lost in space. Where is he? Because, and I love that comment. Nothing says disco like upholstery orange.
What did it, I mean, those fabrics even. Just.
Two completely different, I mean, closets just don't work together. A lame that you have to fuse with a heavy upholstery. It's never. I mean, I know
when you design, you are drawing on experience. Maybe he's not got much of experience of disco or watching disco films, but using that type of fabric, there must have been some consideration there of why you wanted to use that heavier, almost upholstery fabric.
I think because of the pattern.
Right.
You look at the pattern and it needed structure.
Oh, I see.
And then he thought, I'll get structure, I'll get this because it'll give it structure. And then, oh my gosh, oh dear, it needs bling. I'll get this. Without understanding with experience that they're two completely different fabrics.
But when you compare that to his winter dress, or the first one from episode 1 when he had those eyelets that he put in. It's chalk and cheese, wasn't it, really?
Completely. It was lost in space, that one. It just, everything went wrong. The trim was not really workable. The two fabrics together were not really workable. Trying to fuse something with a steam iron, that's never going to work. So it was just, it was waiting to happen, I think.
So every time it cut to him, did you just go, I can't watch?
I know, I did. But the thing about Damien, his the factor of self-belief is so strong that you go with him, and you will it to work for him. It doesn't.
And I've liked him from the beginning, and I've wanted him to go all the way, and I've really enjoyed watching him, partly because I think I see a lot of myself in him. He just enjoys doing it, and he just wants to sew. And there was a scene in the pattern challenge where he just got a pen and he was marking on the fabric, yet the judges seemed to look a complete disdain at him, like, why are you not using chalk? But why not use...
Well, so what? You use whatever works. Use what's hand. I mean, and that's the great thing about dressmaking and couture work. You know, you just look. If you're working with a dark fabric, and I sometimes use chalk on a gritty fabric with a lot of texture, and the marks just go away.
Yeah, yeah.
So it doesn't matter that they're going to brush off eventually. They might brush off before you need them to brush off.
Yeah.
So you just grab a pen. You use whatever it takes.
And that's what he did. And he used whatever he needed, and he got it done, and he got it finished. And full respect to him, he got it finished. All right, let's move on to Raf and his gold disco jumpsuit kind of piece. What did you think of that? Was that what you'd wear out on the disco?
Oh. This really got me riled, because it was a perfect case of, less would be more, but more would be more. Now, the jumpsuit, there was just not enough fabric. He chose a fabric which really spoke beautifully, but there wasn't enough of it. It was mean. That jumpsuit there's not enough to show off the liquid nature and the light capturing properties of that fabric. I would have loved to have seen a harem trouser out of that.
Ooh,
and more in the bodice, because it didn't really fit in the back fork was a bit tight. And when the model was standing there, you could see the knees bubbling already. There just wasn't enough fabric. I would have wanted to see a lot more jumpsuit and a lot less cape. The cape just swallowed it up.
Yeah. And the cape was a little extra, wasn't it? If he had, I think it was, if he had time, he'd make the cape. Yes. So get rid of the cape.
Admirable to overlay, to foil the fabric, admirable to do that. Lovely idea to hand dip the ostrich feathers. That's great. But there was so much at the neck. It was so claustrophobic. You had feathers up to here, and then you had a mask, and you just saw nothing of the model. And there was enough here that the cape could have come and just ended over the elbow, and then maybe gone a little bit lower in the back. But almost when the model walked out, it was almost like the cape was hiding things for some reason. But a lot less cape, half of the fabric would have done. Let
that fabric be the focal point.
Yes. Yeah, because black's a difficult, if you're going to wear a black dress, you sort of want miles and miles of fabric, which is what we saw. So the gold was the showpiece.
Yes.
Show the gold. And you can still, the model would have looked just as thin. You could have shown just as much skin. It could have been equally sexy, but it could have been done with twice as much fabric. And then when you shear fabric, that kind of fabric up, when you gather it up, you get so much more life in it.
Oh, you would have got all those ruffled pleats and shadows.
Yeah, exactly. And
then,
flow.
as you say, if it was bellowing as it came down, had the model walked down the catwalk, we would have got loads of movement, wouldn't we?
There would have been a lot more swish, a lot more waft, a lot more of that, yeah.
Fascinating.
Let the fabric speak. He chose so well, but just let it do its job.
Yeah. Serena then, with the sort of the red and silver sort of number, wasn't it? With we've got the curve again, haven't we?
Yeah. I mean, she did so well with joining the two fabrics together, and it was very neat and tidy in the top. And then the matching on the side was beautiful. The invisible zip was just
stunning.
Excellent. But for me, the dress itself, again, it failed from a design standpoint because it just hung. the hemline seemed to be in no man's land. It wasn't long, it wasn't ankle length. It was just in a very strange position. And I would have loved to have seen that dress just open up at the bottom and just twirl and flow a little bit more. It just hung.
Yes.
It got really, for me, it got very boring.
So
at the hem.
So
and,
how would
and
she,
I didn't
how would she have opened it up then? Could she have done?
So she just could have taken her pattern and slashed it, and then just opened it up all around, made more of a circle out of it.
Yeah, there we are.
Yeah, and just given it some swirl, that the fabric would, again, it would have caught the light, it would have had some movement. And I didn't understand she did a long contour dart on one side. I don't know why. Maybe she put that in because it wasn't fitting, it was a bit too big. But she could have accomplished that fit on the side. But maybe her zip was already in and it was big on that side, and so she decided to put a contour dart in, because I don't think that great big vertical dart belonged.
No, I understand.
That was a, yeah.
I think you're right. With when we look back, I mean, we've only got one more to talk about, but what the overriding thing is coming from it is perhaps they didn't move enough, as in they didn't allow the fabric to move enough. And when you're working, as you say, with sequins and glittery, sparkly fabric, you'd want it to move, wouldn't you? Because you want then the fabric to talk.
Absolutely.
So they obviously thought to go for a tight fitting number.
But you're going to dance.
Yeah.
You're going to a disco. You're going to be moving. You're going to be twirling around. You're going to be, your legs aren't, this could have been
You're completely right. I think this might be maybe confusion in the brief, because it started off as Dream Girls and they cut to the picture of, I can't remember the name.
Supremes?
Yes, in those lovely tight figure-hugging numbers, which you would look great as a performer, but then the brief was then a disco diva outfit where you want to look good on the dance floor. Exactly. And that's not the outfit you would wear. So I think there was confusion maybe on the brief and what they were trying to do, a mixture of both. And they're not doing it very well either.
No, not really. I mean, I think Serena's was a cocktail dress, but it wasn't a dancing dress.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it could have been a dancing dress, but it would have been restricted.
Yeah, she wouldn't have moved as much.
Yeah.
Good point. And then let's move on to Fari's red asymmetric with the shoulder thing.
Yeah, beautifully done. Beautifully done. The overlay sleeve, which was really clever, and I loved it. I've never seen that before. I can see how it's done, but it didn't really fit on the shoulder. There was a really big gape here, and there was a gape at the back. It didn't really sit as the picture showed it would, but I thought it was really well done, and I thought that split was just perfectly placed on the upper leg. That was just beautifully done. Now that would have been a dazzler on the dance floor.
Yeah.
And it's red. It's red. Yeah, you can't put red, can you? No, I thought she did really well. I thought she saved herself with that frock.
Yes, it was clear then, and I think we all knew then we're going to say goodbye to Damien, aren't we?
Yes, lost in space, Damien. Poor guy. I'll miss him so much because he was a lot of fun. He had that quirky sense of humor that, different culture.
Yeah.
And he kept people on their toes. And I think he and Joe had a lot of fun.
Yes. You kind of never knew what was going to come out of Damien. And that was exciting. You just didn't know if it was going to be brilliant or not, or whether he was, and we got that right from the beginning. That cheeky chappy, pull it out. Oh, we're going to try a bit of this, going to try a bit of that. Yeah. And I remember saying, I think he's got more skills than that's showing at the moment, and he's probably going to go far. And look, he got all the way to the quarterfinals, so it was.
He did, and we know he's a builder. He does carpentry. He's a musician. He does computers. He understands processes. He knows how to put things together, and he has given us a lot of lovely surprises along the way.
Very much so. Let's go into garment of the week then, because this has caused some controversy on Unpicked, whether Rebecca should have got garment of the week or not. Tell us your opinion.
I can't argue with it at all. I thought it was well deserved. I mean, anytime you take 3 different fabrics, different textures, that's always a good design brief. That's always a good way to go. It fit. She had a couple of problems with the princess seams, which she could have sorted out, maybe notching it differently and controlling that. But maybe the final tier at the bottom could have done with another layer, or was just given it a bit more texture. But I had no problem at all. I thought, and when they were going to reveal the garment of the week, I thought, oh, the shape of that drape over it.
Yes.
I can't see a cape or feathers.
No.
Oh, good, it's Rebecca. And, whether they just thought, we've got to give Rebecca a win because she's done so well, but she's always playing second to Serena. I don't know what it was. Maybe that was, but for me, I thought it was well deserved, very well. It fit her. It was a lovely color. She married her fabrics together beautifully. She handled the different textures well. I had no problem with that decision at all.
She came, as we said, with the fire in the belly. She'd got it all planned. She knew what she was going to do.
Yeah.
Very well deserved from that point of view.
Yes, absolutely.
Did you have, when you look back on that whole round, and perhaps all 3 rounds, did any particular one stand out where you thought, yes, that was great? If I made that, I'd be proud of that.
I liked Serena's baby dress. Lovely, because she handled all parts of the brief, and everything that could possibly go out of control, she sorted it out. Beautifully done. I liked Rebecca's transformation challenge. That was my favorite, because I think she dealt with the fabrics very well. Yeah. And then I couldn't disagree with her winner in the made to measure challenge.
Oh, so, well, it was a great episode, and we got the glamour and the glitz, we got fun, and we got a bit of excitement there when it was Fari and Damien at the bottom for the first 2 rounds. Who was going to go? It was good classic TV from that point.
Exactly. It was a good episode.
So we're going now into the semi-final with Raf, Serena, Rebecca, and Fari.
Well, this will be interesting.
Isn't it, John?
Yeah.
1940s.
And 40s, yes. So we're going to see, that's a lovely era of design, because it was kind of that utility dress era, that make, do, and mend kind of era, where there was a deceptively difficult style and use of cloth and all that. So love that period. We'll see. There's the fit will be. I love the bags, the trouser. That's going to be fun.
So you think that's what we're going to be looking at?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Oh, for week 9, that will be week 9 semi-final. Oh, it's just, I don't know where the time's gone, but it's been absolutely brilliant.
I know. I was thinking about when we embarked on this 10 years. Yeah, but it has gone well. It's been a great deal of fun, Stuart. It's
been wonderful, and we've learned so much. And until next week, the semi-final, happy sewing, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.